Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. Sofia paced nervously in the abandoned warehouse, checking her phone every few seconds as if a lifeline. She had received the summons from her contact in the mob earlier that day, dreading what it could mean. Now, in this empty, cavernous space, she was alone with her fears. Two figures emerged from the shadows, their heavy footfalls echoing in the emptiness. Well, if it isn't our little debtor, sneered Marco, the mob enforcer. Beside him stood Luca, taller and more menacing in his silence. I need more time, stammered Sofia, cursing her weakness. Marco laughed mirthlessly. Time's up, sweetheart. We've given you chance after chance, but the debts just keep piling up. You know what that means. He pulled a pistol from his jacket, examining it casually. Sofia's heart raced, but she willed herself not to look away. Please, just one more week. I have a way to make good on it, I swear. Luca spoke for the first time, his low voice carrying an edge. We're done with excuses. You should have thought of that before borrowing more than you could handle. As Marco raised the gun, Sofia cried out, Wait! I know someone looking for help moderating their dark web marketplace. It pays well and I can start immediately. Inside, she was screaming, desperate to stay alive by any means. The men exchanged a look, intrigued. Sofia nodded fervently. The pay is in cryptocurrency, untraceable. I'll have your money in no time, I promise. Marco lowered the gun, considering. All right, you've bought yourself another chance, but this is the last one. Don't screw it up. Sofia breathed a shaky sigh of relief. She had survived, but entering the dark underworld of the dark web came with its own risks. Leaving the warehouse, she steeled herself for the disturbing work ahead. It was her only choice if she wanted to stay alive. That night, Sofia began her new job moderating the red web marketplace. True to its name, the site's listings shocked even her jaded sensibilities. She monitored disturbing transactions, deleting any that broke the site's rules. The pay was deposited directly and anonymously, as promised. A few days into the job, Sofia received a message from an agent Clark claiming to be with the FBI. Intrigued, she agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. There, Clark explained they were investigating Red Web and wanted Sofia to become a confidential informant in exchange for immunity. I've seen what's on that site. Why would I help you? Asked Sofia warily. Clark leaned forward intently. Because I can protect you. Whereas one mistake there and you're as good as dead. Help us shut it down. Sofia hesitated, then nodded slowly. Anything was better than the mob's threats or prison. She had no choice but to accept Clark's offer if she wanted to stay alive and free. And so began her dangerous double life, moderating the dark transactions while secretly reporting to Agent Clark. The money kept coming, keeping Marco and Luca at bay for now. But as Sofia delved deeper into Red Web's disturbing operations, she sensed something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Little did she know the horrors that would soon be unleashed once her dual roles made her a target on both sides of the law. Sofia woke with a start, her heart pounding. The same nightmare had plagued her sleep for weeks. Walking endless dark corridors while something stalked her just out of sight. Shaking off the lingering fear, she checked the time. Nearly noon, later than she intended after another restless night. After a meager breakfast, Sofia booted up her computer to begin the day's work. Logging into Red Web, the usual flood of new listings awaited moderation. She steeled herself as always before clicking the first post. To her dismay, it was a gruesome murder video. Though she had witnessed countless depraved acts, something about this felt different, more real. Her hands trembled, deleting it, hoping the person was just an actor. The next few hours passed in a blur of disturbing content. Hitmen for hire, human trafficking, even snuff films now. Each deletion weighed on her, yet she had no choice if she wanted to keep the money flowing and mob at bay. Mid-afternoon, a message from Clark popped up amid the chaos. Need update. Meet tonight. Usual spot. Sofia sighed, dreading another interrogation, but grateful for small breaks. At least he was keeping his end of the deal so far. That evening, Sofia arrived early to the rundown diner where they met, hoping the bustle would calm her nerves. She scanned the booths instinctively, relaxing slightly when none were occupied. Sliding into a worn vinyl seat, she sipped weak coffee while waiting. 20 minutes passed with no sign of Clark. Sofia tried not to let worry take hold, reminding herself he was often late. But half an hour, then an hour ticked by with nothing. She tried calling his number to no avail. By closing, a sick feeling gripped her stomach. Something was wrong. Racing home, Sofia booted her computer and hacked into surveillance records using skills learned from shadier past dealings. She pulled up footage from the diner that night, scanning each frame desperately. There, a dark van pulled up just as Clark arrived. Men in masks dragged him inside, speeding off into the night. Sofia reeled at the discovery. Had the FBI been compromised? Or was this about Red Web? She had to get to the bottom of it before whoever took Clark came for her next. But with her handler gone, she was truly alone for the first time. That night, nightmares came again of endless corridors and a presence drawing nearer. Sofia woke drenched in sweat, the memory of Clark's abduction replaying in her mind. She had to act, but approaching the FBI was clearly out of the question now. There was only one lead left, the dark web itself. Over the next few days, Sofia threw herself into her work with new purpose. She began secretly archiving troubling posts, messages, anything that didn't seem quite right. Her suspicions grew that Red Web's true purpose lay deeper than illegal goods. Something far more sinister was happening beneath the surface. One post caught her eye, different than the rest. A cryptic message board with codes and coordinates. Sofia took screenshots furiously, decoding bits and pieces. To her horror, she realized it detailed real life missions being carried out with gruesome photos as proof. She had to get out, warn someone, but who could she trust now? Her only hope was to hack Red Web from the inside, find the ones controlling it all. Steeling her resolve, Sofia began planning her most dangerous infiltration yet, knowing one slip could cost her life. The monsters were closer than she realized, and she was the only one who could stop them. Sofia sat huddled in the dark, every sense on high alert. After 3 nights on the run, she was growing exhausted, but couldn't risk stopping. Her safe houses had all been compromised. She was being hunted. Using skills learned from past dealings, Sofia hacked surveillance cameras and traffic cams as she moved under cover of night. To her horror, she spotted figures searching each previous location. They were closing in, and she was running out of places to hide. Her only hope was to hack Red Web servers from a remote location, find the ones controlling the dark operations. But first, she needed to lay a false trail. Buy herself time. Sofia hacked into the FBI database using a proxy, making it appear she was hiding in an abandoned factory upstate. With luck, it would keep them occupied long enough. Reaching a run-down internet cafe in a seedy part of town, Sofia ordered coffee to stay alert. Her hands shook slightly from fatigue and stress as she booted her laptop. After several attempts, she managed to break into Red Web's firewall. Codes and directories flew by as she searched frantically for clues. Deep in the server logs, Sofia found strings of code that didn't belong. Isolating and decoding them revealed coordinates for meetups all over the city, and photos of Clark and others in various states of torture. Her blood ran cold, seeing the agent who had used her reduced to such a state. She had to keep going, digging deeper Sofia uncovered files detailing shipments to a remote warehouse. Schematics and security protocols were meticulously planned. Whatever was happening there, it was of highest importance to the organization. Just then, a message popped up on her screen. "We know you're watching." A chill ran through Sofia's body as more words appeared. "The factory was a nice try, but we never lose for long. It's only a matter of time now." She slammed the laptop shut in panic. They were toying with her, letting her run just a while longer before the final hunt. Sofia fled the cafe in a blind panic, ditching her laptop in a trash bin. She had to get as far away as possible. But where could she hide that they couldn't find? An idea came to her. If she couldn't escape physically, perhaps she could do so digitally. That night, under cover of darkness, Sofia broke into an internet provider's local hub. Working furiously, she rerouted her digital trail through several foreign dark websites using anonymous relays. Now her location was untraceable, even to the most sophisticated tracking. It bought her precious time to plan her next move. The remote warehouse was her only remaining lead. If she could infiltrate it undiscovered, perhaps find evidence to expose RedWeb's true purpose, she could end this nightmare. But it would be the most dangerous thing she had ever attempted. Steeling her resolve, Sofia began planning every excruciating detail of her infiltration. She would have only one chance. If caught, there would be no escape. As she worked, the nightmares returned of endless corridors and a presence drawing ever closer, reminding her the monsters were real. It was time to face them head-on. Sofia crept through the dense forest under cover of night, senses on high alert. After weeks of careful planning, her infiltration of the remote RedWeb warehouse was underway. She had hacked schematics of the sprawling complex, learning its nooks and blind spots. Cameras were avoided, sensors bypassed using jammers and diversions. Now only the physical security remained between her and the truth. Slipping through a broken fence, Sofia hugged the building's shadow and scanned for patrols. The coast was clear. She had timed her approach perfectly. Finding an unlocked maintenance door, she slipped inside soundlessly. The cavernous space was filled with crates and equipment under dim emergency lights. Sofia pulled up the warehouse schematics on her phone, orienting herself. Her goal was the server room. If any clues existed, they would be in the digital records. Weaving between stacks, Sofia froze at muffled cries in the distance. Moving toward the sound, she peered around a corner at a nightmarish scene. Prisoners locked in cages, some barely alive. Her blood ran cold, seeing Clark and others among the tortured souls. She had to get them out, but escaping with captives would ruin any chance at the truth. With a heavy heart, Sofia left them for now and continued her mission. The server room had to be her priority to expose this evil. Then she could send help. Deeper into the maze, Sofia at last found the server room and got to work. Her skills were put to the test hacking the sophisticated system. Files began downloading as she dug for damning evidence. Then an alert blared. Her presence had been detected. Boops pounded in the distance, closing in fast. Sofia scrambled to finish the download as footsteps neared, cursing her lack of time. Just then, a shadow fell across the doorway. She was out of chances. Spinning to engage her pursuer, Sofia froze in horror. A towering figure filled the entrance, its features obscured by a featureless mask. It cocked its head, regarding her silently as if curious. She had to escape, but could only watch, paralyzed as it slowly approached. This thing was not human. Snapping out of her trance, Sofia lunged for the only weapon within reach, a fire extinguisher. She swung with all her strength, but it was like attacking stone. The thing caught the cylinder effortlessly, crushing it to dust in its grip. Sofia backed away in terror, realizing too late she was cornered. This monster would be her end. As it closed in for the kill, her laptop pinged. The download was complete. In a last desperate act, she grabbed it and hurled the device at the thing with all her strength. It connected with a crack, sparks flying from its mask. The thing reeled back, howling in pain and rage. Sofia didn't wait to see more, sprinting from the room at top speed. She had to escape and expose the truth before they silenced her for good. Sofia ran blindly through the warehouse maze, lungs burning for air. The thing's enraged, howls echoed behind her, drawing closer with each step. She had to lose it or die trying. Risking a glance back, Sofia saw only darkness. Too late. A massive form crashed into her from the shadows. They tumbled across the floor in a frenzied struggle. Her attacker's inhuman strength was overwhelming. Just as its hands found her throat to end it, Sofia remembered the taser in her back pocket, a last resort. Jamming it against the thing's masked face, she pulled the trigger with a prayer. Its body convulsed as electricity surged through it, an unearthly shriek splitting the air. Sofia rolled free, gasping for breath as her attacker writhed in pain. She had to keep moving while it was incapacitated. Stumbling onward, Sofia spotted an emergency exit up ahead and burst through into the cool night. Freedom was within reach, but her ordeal was far from over. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Reinforcements were coming. Ducking into the forest, Sofia fled as fast as her exhausted body allowed. The wail of sirens was joined by shouts and barking dogs on her trail. She was still being hunted, this time with the authorities manipulated into the hunt. Her only hope was to transmit the damning evidence before they silenced her for good. Finding a secluded clearing, Sofia booted her battered laptop with shaking hands. To her relief, the download was intact. She had proof to expose RedWeb. Hacking into every major news network using anonymous relays, Sofia began the upload. Within minutes, the truth would break worldwide for all to see. Her pursuers closed in as the final files transferred at an agonizing crawl. Just then, a message appeared. "Well done. You've served your purpose well. We almost lost sight of the bigger picture in our games. Thank you for helping us achieve our true goal tonight." A chill ran through Sofia as she realized too late what was really happening. Headlights broke through the trees, encircling her position. Figures emerged from the vehicles, not law enforcement as she expected, but the masked monsters from the warehouse. Their leader stepped forward, regarding her almost kindly beneath its featureless mask. "You've been very clever, but the game is over. We have what we wanted now. You helped spread our reach beyond anything we could achieve alone. Truly, you have been an asset." Sofia backed away in horror, realizing she had unwittingly helped the evil she sought to expose. Her laptop dinged, upload complete, as the monsters closed in for the final act. Somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf howled into the night. Mark scrolled through page after page of indecipherable code and diagrams, his curiosity growing. For over an hour, he had been combing through the dark corners of the internet, following a trail that led him to this mysterious website. Project Lazarus, it was called, though it offered no details about its purpose or members. Only the faintest hints could be gleaned from its cryptic pages. References to viral manipulation, reanimation experiments, and grand plans for a new world order. Disturbing images showed cages of animals in various states of decay and rebirth. Mark shuddered to think what horrors they had unleashed in their pursuit of understanding life and death. A notification popped up. New files had been uploaded only minutes ago. Mark clicked through folder after folder, his unease mounting with each gruesome discovery. Blood samples, tissue cultures, notes detailing the effects of their engineered viruses on living subjects. It seemed their research had progressed far beyond theoretical. But to what end? He found no explanations, just implications of power and control. A shiver ran down his spine as he realized these experiments involved far more than science. This was a descent into madness, a corruption of ethics, all to serve some inscrutable agenda. He exited the site, his mind reeling. This was too big, too dark to be left in shadows. As a biology student, he felt compelled to expose their inhumane activities, sure that proper authorities would shut them down. But where to even start uncovering the truth about an organization so secretive, its members untraceable, through anonymous online identities? An idea came to him. Their remote facility had to be located somewhere, and based on iPlogs, the most recent uploads originated from a small town a few hours away. It was a long shot, but perhaps locals there had noticed anything suspicious on the outskirts, worth checking out during his upcoming weekend. That Friday, Mark packed his bag and hit the road. The 3-hour drive passed slowly as his thoughts churned over what he might find. Rolling fields soon gave way to dense forest, and eventually he reached the town limits. A sleepy little place where nothing much ever happened. Or so he thought. Asking around yielded strange stories. Reports of strange lights and noises from the woods at night, mysterious deliveries to an abandoned farmhouse, even rumors of men in hazmat suits patrolling the perimeter. It seemed his hunch had been right. The isolated community lay near the hidden lab. After a fruitless day of questioning locales, Mark decided to investigate the old farm for himself. Dusk was falling as he entered the overgrown field, flashlight in hand. Through the trees ahead, he spotted lights moving behind boarded windows. Drawing closer, he peered inside and froze. Figures in biohazard gear moved about cages of small animals, some whole, others in varying stages of decay. A chill ran through him as one subject twitched and rose, flesh sloughing off bone. They had achieved reanimation, and whatever virus they engineered was active and lethal. He stumbled back, mind reeling with the implications. This was no theoretical research. Project Lazarus had crossed every line, playing God with life and death for their own ends. He had to expose them before things spiraled further out of control. But as he turned to leave, a noise came from the woods behind. They had seen him watching. His discovery had put him in their crosshairs. From here, events would be set in motion that Mark could never have foreseen, unraveling in a nightmare beyond any horror he could imagine. Mark raced through the forest as shadows closed in behind him. Branches whipped at his face as he pushed his body to its limits, fear and adrenaline, fueling his flight. He dared not look back, certain they were in pursuit. Breaking free of the tree line, he spotted his car in the distance and poured on more speed. A snap of twigs made him glance over his shoulder. 2 dark figures emerged from the woods. He fumbled for his keys with shaking hands as footsteps pounded closer. With a click, the door unlocked and he dove inside, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as hands grabbed at the window. Throwing the car into gear, Mark slammed on the gas and peeled away in a spray of gravel. His pursuers shrank into the rearview mirror as fields flew by. Only when the farm was a distant speck did he dare to slow down, heart pounding against his ribs. What the hell had he gotten himself into? Those people, if they could even be called that anymore, were not playing by any rules. The next morning, Mark returned to campus in a daze, replaying the night's events over and over. Should he go to the police? But what proof did he have besides ramblings that would make him seem insane? No, he needed hard evidence of the lab's activities first. In the coming days, strange illnesses began cropping up around town. At the local clinic, Mark treated a man with a sky-high fever and violent delirium. Nothing in the patient's symptoms matched any known infection. As Mark struggled to stabilize him, the man suddenly seized up and went still. Rushing to administer CPR, Mark froze in horror. Beneath his hands, the corpse's eyes snapped open, clouded orbs finding Mark's own gaze. A guttural snarl rose from its throat as teeth snapped at empty air. Mark stumbled back with a yell just as the thing lunged, only to be restrained by orderlies. Word spread fast of the mysterious epidemic and its implications. Mark knew in his gut this was no natural disease. It was the work of Project Lazarus. Their viral tinkering had gotten out of hand, and now the entire town was at risk of infection. Roads in and out were suddenly blocked by fallen trees, cutting the community off from help. Mark suspected the lab's involvement, determined to contain the outbreak they had unleashed. As cases multiplied, the infected displayed increasingly disturbing behaviors: loss of higher brain function, violent urges to attack the living. Mark tended victims as best he could under the circumstances, but supplies and space ran low as bodies piled up faster than they could be contained. The clinic became a death trap, and Mark knew he had to get out while he still could. Grabbing what remained of use from the overrun building, he fled into the night. Wandering streets now abandoned, he spotted movement in the shadows. A gaunt figure shambled into view, flesh hanging off bone. It lurched toward Mark with outstretched arms. He swung his bag with all his strength, caving in its skull. More were coming. He had to find shelter and answers. The old farmhouse loomed ahead. Lights still burned within. They were still operating despite the chaos engulfing the town. Mark crept to a window and peered inside. Men in biohazard suits moved among the infected, taking notes and samples with disturbing calm. Rage and revulsion welled up in Mark at their callous disregard for human life. Banging on the glass, he screamed for them to open the door, demanding to know if they had a cure for their virus running rampant. After a tense standoff, the door creaked open, spilling warm light into the night. "Come in. We've been expecting you," said a voice from within the shadows. "It's time you understood the purpose of our work here." The apartment was empty and cold when Sarah first walked through the door, dropping her single duffel bag onto the bare wooden floors with a hollow thud. She ran her hand along the smooth plaster walls, feeling the emptiness echo inside. It was smaller than her old place, with just one main room and a tiny bathroom. But it would do for now. Anything was better than staying in the home she had shared with Michael, surrounded by memories of their failed relationship. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the sparse space, Sarah set about unpacking the few belongings she had brought. Photos, books, and clothes filled some of the emptiness, but she could still feel the loneliness seeping in through the cracks. Sitting cross-legged on an air mattress, she opened up her laptop and scrolled mindlessly through social media, envying photos of friends' happy gatherings, from which she now felt excluded. With a sigh, she closed the computer, realizing she was only making herself feel more isolated. That night, as Sarah lay awake, staring into the darkness, she began to notice faint noises drifting through the walls, quiet scrapes and taps that could have been pipes settling, or perhaps mice in the ceiling. Trying to ignore them, she pulled the thin blanket tighter and turned onto her side, focusing on slowing her breathing. Just as sleep began to overtake her, a loud bang from the kitchen startled her eyes open once more. Heart racing, Sarah sat up and peered into the blackness, straining to see if anything had fallen or been disturbed. But all seemed still. Over the next few days, the strange sounds continued at odd hours. Cabinets would creak as if being opened by themselves in the middle of the night. Floorboards would groan as though under heavy footsteps, even when Sarah was the only one home. She searched for rational explanations. The building settling, pipes expanding with temperature changes. But the noises unsettled her all the same. One evening, as Sarah scrolled through a local news site on her phone, an article headline caught her eye: "Paranormal activity on the rise in abandoned buildings." Intrigued, she clicked to read more and discovered the reporter was referring to a dark web forum called SpectralNet, where users anonymously shared accounts of hauntings and supernatural experiences. Against her better judgment, Sarah's curiosity got the better of her. She downloaded the Tor browser and navigated to the forum's hidden address. The interface was stark and uninviting, with black text on a dark purple background. Sarah began scrolling through recent posts, reading tales of objects moving on their own, shadows glimpsed from the corner of the eye, and even full-bodied apparitions. Most unnerved her, but a few posters claimed to have made contact with spirits through rituals or spells. One in particular caught her attention, a description of a seance to summon and communicate with a resident ghost. Though she knew it was likely nonsense, part of Sarah wondered if performing such a ritual might explain the noises in her new home, or at least give her a sense of control over the unexplained events. Late that night, after ensuring she was alone in the apartment, Sarah gathered the few items described in the ritual: 3 white candles, a small mirror, and a pen and notepad. She arranged them in a triangle on the bare wooden floor, lighting the candles as the only source of light in the otherwise dark room. Sitting cross-legged before the mirror, Sarah took a deep breath to steady her nerves and began speaking the invocation posted on SpectralNet. "Spirit who dwells where I now reside, I call to you in peace and goodwill. Reveal to me your presence if you are here, through reflection in this glass." She waited in silence, heart pounding as the candle flames flickered shadows across the walls. At first, nothing happened. Then, just as Sarah was about to dismiss it as silly, the lights flickered once and a chill ran down her spine. Though she saw no apparition in the mirror, she felt a lingering sense of being watched from the edges of the room. Shivering, she quickly blew out the candles and retreated to bed, pulling the blankets tight as if they could ward off whatever unseen thing now seemed to dwell with her in the apartment. As she drifted off into a fitful sleep, Sarah wondered if she had just invited something more sinister into her home. The next morning, Sarah woke with a lingering sense of unease. She tried to rationalize the strange events of the night before as an overactive imagination, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the kitchen, she noticed the cabinet doors were slightly ajar, as if recently opened. Pushing it off as a trick of the mind, Sarah set about making coffee. As the pot brewed, she turned to grab a mug and froze. The cabinet she had just closed was now standing wide open again. Sarah ran through the apartment, checking every room for signs of an intruder, but found nothing amiss. Returning to the kitchen, she stared at the cabinet in confusion and dread. There was no way it could have opened on its own. Over the next few days, more odd occurrences seemed to follow Sarah wherever she went. Small objects like pens and hair ties would mysteriously vanish, only to reappear in impossible places. Floorboards would creak at all hours, even when she was home alone. Strange shadows seemed to dart at the edges of her vision. Most unsettling were the cold spots, invisible patches of freezing air that would drift through the apartment, raising the hairs on Sarah's arms. She began to feel like she was being watched constantly. Sleep became fitful as noises echoed through the walls at night, keeping her in a state of high alert. Desperate for answers, Sarah logged back onto SpectralNet. But this time, when she entered the forum's address into her browser, an error message appeared. The site was no longer accessible. Panic rose in her chest as she realized whatever entity she may have summoned was now actively working to cut her off from the only source of information she had. Alone with no way to research, Sarah resorted to setting up a small hidden camera in the kitchen to record overnight. The next morning, she anxiously reviewed the footage. At first, nothing seemed amiss on the black and white display. Then, around 3 a.m., the cabinet door slowly creaked open of its own accord once more. Sarah replayed it over and over, unable to find any logical explanation. That evening, as dusk fell outside the apartment windows, Sarah felt the temperature in the air plummet. Goosebumps rose on her skin as an invisible force seemed to press down on her. From the bedroom, she heard a loud bang that shook the walls. Rushing in, she found the mirror from her ritual now shattered on the floor, as if thrown forcefully against the wall. 3 long scratches suddenly appeared on the bedroom door, gouged deep into the wood as if carved with sharp talons. Sarah backed away in horror, realizing whatever entity was haunting her home was growing stronger and far more malevolent. It was actively targeting her now, no longer content with subtle disturbances. She had to find a way to banish it before it did real harm. But with no internet access, her options were limited. That night, Sarah barely slept as unexplained noises echoed all around the apartment. At 3 a.m. precisely, the cabinet door creaked open once more on the hidden camera. She watched through her fingers, paralyzed by fear. Whatever was haunting her knew she was watching and was taunting her mercilessly. By morning, Sarah was running on adrenaline and caffeine alone. As she paced the small space, trying to think of a plan, her foot kicked something under the couch. Bending down, she found an old book, its cover worn and pages yellowed with age. The title read Rituals and Incantations for Banishing Spirits. Her hands shook as she opened to a dog-eared page describing an ancient ritual for cleansing a home of malevolent presences. It was her only hope. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the apartment, Sarah began setting up for the banishing ritual. She drew symbols on the floor in salt and lit white candles at the 4 corners of each room. Clutching the old book, she began reciting the Latin incantation just as night fell. At first, all was still. Then a cold wind blew through, though no windows were open, extinguishing 2 of the candles. From the kitchen, cabinets slammed shut violently, one after the other. Sarah stood her ground and raised her voice, continuing the ritual despite her fear. A dark shape began to materialize at the edge of her vision, taking form from the shadows. 2 glowing orbs appeared where I should be, staring hatred directly at Sarah. She refused to back down, meeting its gaze and finishing the last words of the incantation with conviction. For a moment, nothing happened. Then an inhuman shriek split the air as the entity was forcefully expelled from the apartment in a rush of icy wind. Sarah fell to her knees, shaking as silence descended once more. It was over. She had faced her greatest fear and won. Looking around in the flickering candlelight, Sarah saw no signs of the malevolent spirit remaining. For the first time since moving in, the apartment felt empty rather than haunted. She had survived her ordeal and emerged from it stronger than before, no longer afraid of the unknown that lurks beyond our sight in the darkness.